Hello game fans and welcome to the Steam Chamber. This week we're taking a look at Rise of Venice from Kalypso. Now this is a simulation strategy game of the mercantile variety, which sees you as a trader in Renaissance Venice. Now you start off as a young man in a minor family of no significance, and it is through the various storytelling you find out that it is your mission and your grandfather's dying wish that you use trade to make a name for your family, as the wealth that comes with trade and mercantile pursuits can help you make a name for yourself in the Renaissance period. So you start off as a relatively minor person with just a small ship and a small starting amount of capital, and you must trade various different goods from port to port in order to build yourself up into a trading empire. Now, as I say, when the game starts, you start with one ship, you start with a very small sum of money, and you can only access a certain amount of the goods. Now, each port trades lots and lots of goods. Different ports have different specialisms, and different ports have different needs. Now, you can do that. You can check out what cities need and what they want, but don't necessarily need that much, or what they have in abundance, and also what they produce by looking at each of the city's marketplaces and the various city info. However, also each city will have a small icon above it telling you what they're in dire need of as well. Now this can be really helpful as you get into the early game, as you start to learn who's got what, and then you can quickly pop from one to the other, just quickly building up your small amounts of cash by going and delivering what they're in dire need of. And you'll be doing a lot of this at the start, as you really don't have access to much in the way of goods. You only have a small selection of goods which you are allowed to trade. Also, you only have a small amount of ports for which you're licensed to trade in as well. And in order to trade in new ports, you will have to bribe your way into them. Now, this costs quite a lot of money, so you will be starting off with just these few ports. And as you build up your wealth, you can start to open new ports, and that way you're getting access to new stuff. However, it takes quite a lot of time before you're able to start trading new things. The way the game's leveling progress works is you have a set of criteria to fulfill, such as a certain amount of wealth, a certain amount of ships, a certain amount of sailors. And once you've fulfilled these criteria, you then must go to the council in Venice, and you must apply to rise up to the next rank, whether it be trader or merchant and those beyond. Now, this does actually take quite a bit of time. It's not really going to be something like some of these other games where you might get lucky and there's a dire need of something and it happens to be very, very cheap in another port. That really doesn't happen in the early game. I mean, it took me a good few hours just to rise to the first of the next ranks. And this is a game that you will be sinking some time into, because you're probably looking at a few hours before you even go up to maybe the third rank, and before you get a second convoy. Now, that's where the game starts to get interesting. Once you get access to new ships, you can either group your ships together into one convoy, or you can split your ships up into separate convoys, in which case then you need to employ various different family members, uncles, cousins and such, in order to look after these convoys and to captain these convoys. You're also able to level up your captains of your convoys and your ships as individual ships as well. This brings new traits such as how quick they move, or how far they can see, or how well they trade, or even how well they are in combat. You can then add new vessels with combat abilities to your convoys, which are escorts, which help fend off pirates and such, which aren't a huge problem in the earlier game, but as you progress through the game, this will start to become more of an issue. There are also other things that adversely affect you as well. There could be something along the lines of a plague, or some sort of pestilence in a port, or a large fire or something, which would then decimate their production. As the game goes on, you can start to build up larger sums of money. You can start to invest as well, which means you can start, rather than just trading other people's goods, you can start producing goods yourself. So you can build warehouses and factories and such, and then start producing the raw material, take in the raw materials and produce things, and just ship the raw materials, which means that you're then able to generate a larger income as you're cutting out the middlemen. The balance of the game is quite nice. It works quite well. Like I say, it can be a little bit slow at first and doesn't exactly get faster as you go throughout the game. However, you can, when going from port to port, you can speed the game up if need be, which means resources replenish quicker, as resources tend to replenish every 10 days. It works on a 10-day cycle, so every 10 days there are going to be new resources in a city. However, you've got to be mindful of things like how much you take from a city. So, for instance, you would have seen on some of the video clips when I'm in the marketplace screen. If you are taking a type of material, you don't want it to go below 1 green bar of their stock, because if you do, then you will start to lose respect in that city, because you're basically plundering their resources as well. They need to keep some back for their own people and also for other traders as well. So you have to be mindful of this, because prestige can really affect you in the game. So you need to bear that in mind as if you buy goods in a place but you don't necessarily buy too many, then your prestige will go up. If you then sell goods to a new place that are in need of them, your prestige will go up. You can also do things such as go to churches and pay a tithe, or you can pray. There are more and more elements that make the game a little bit more interesting. You can do as little or as many of these things as you want. If you want to keep it simple and just trade, then you can get away with that. However, it'd be quite silly to ignore a lot of the depth the game has to offer. As you get throughout the game and you start to open new ports, then these prestige elements come in very handy. For instance, if you happen to open up the port of Genoa, which can cost quite a lot of money, if you have a good once you have a good standing in Genoa, you are then able to bribe your way into nearby city-states a lot more easily, and therefore for a lot less money. So it's worth bearing that in mind. Also, you've got to be aware of what the prices are of things that you're buying. So if they are particularly expensive and you're buying a lot of them, and as you buy more, the unit price goes up, and because they're in more dire need, if you then go and sell them in somewhere that they're not in absolute need for, then you're actually going to lose money as well. And this did happen to me a couple of times very early on in the first half hour or so, because I just really wasn't paying attention quite properly to the figures as I probably should have. As I say, the game does have a story, and it's not intrusive in the slightest. It actually does a very good job of drawing you into the game and into the period a little bit more. It's very light, it's not there all the time, and it does a very, very good job of introducing you to the new features as the game comes along, as most missions will be an example, of, oh, you now have this ability unlocked, do this, this, and this with your uncle, or do this, or you might get various trading missions as well. And I, as luck would have it, I had a ship full of oil at one point and went to a nearby port, and then had a mission in which I had to deliver a load of oil to the port next door. So I was very, very lucky there, and as a result ended up with quite a large sum and a large boost to my stock, my wealth, and therefore I was able to then move up to the next rank. And there are sometimes you do get moments like this where you're quite lucky, and you can also do quite interesting things in that you can, once you get like uncles and various family members to control new convoys, you can then pretty much automate them by setting up a trade route. However, this does take a little bit of fiddling about with, and if you're like me and you like a bit more control over your stuff, then you might leave this alone. However, once you get further into the game, you're not really going to have a choice. It's going to get to the point where you've got so much going on that you're going to need to set up various different trade routes. Graphically speaking, the game is quite nice. Obviously, this style of game doesn't really need a whole lot going on visually. However, the game's graphics and the animations are quite nice. They do draw you in quite nicely. If you zoom in too much, there's a lot of detail that isn't there, unfortunately. However, this is more of a stats-based game anyway, and the stat screens and the text screens are very, very clear and do get a lot of information across. There are lots of tooltips when you hover over various items and various different options which help you out throughout the game. Sound-wise, the game is also quite nice as well, and the music for the game is also quite good and is not too jarring, as it can be on a lot of these strategy and 4X-y type games. Although I am aware this isn't a 4X, however, it does have some of those elements to it as well. As I said at the start, there is a multiplayer mode. However, I didn't focus too much on that as the single player alone does take up so much time. And to be honest, I find that sometimes the multiplayer on games like this, it's just a little bit too. The game's just a little bit too in depth and a bit too long to play the multiplayer. However, if you do have some friends that you can invest a significant amount of time with and play together online, then it does have 4-player LAN and internet co-op, multiplayer rather than co-op, sorry. Overall, everything the game is trying to do, it does very, very well. There isn't anything too buggy. I didn't encounter any problems where the game was broken. I didn't encounter any real problems at all. The game is quite fun to play, and it is a bit of a time sink, but that's not necessarily always a bad thing, and that's not for the wrong reasons. You know, it's a time sink for the right reasons, as you really do want to invest a bit of time in the game. The game is available on Steam now. I will put a link below as I always do, and thank you for watching. If you did enjoy the video, then please do like, comment and subscribe. Thanks.